Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out another one of our videos. If you could, before we jump into this thing, click subscribe. That would be a huge help for us and our YouTube channel as we continue to try to just get content out into the universe. That would be a huge help for us. In this conversation, I sit down with, to me, a legend in Winter Garden. Earl Brigham is a barber that has been a barber for 30 plus years in downtown Winter Garden. He's seen so many changes. But this was particularly interesting for me because it was a walk down memory lane. My very first haircut was with Earl. And the unique thing about Earl, well, there's many unique things about Earl, is he's deaf and he's got a huge obstacle to be able to overcome to communicate with his customers. And so we dive into that conversation of overcoming obstacles. But man, Earl is such a good storyteller, and I can't wait for you to see and hear this conversation. Well, I'm super excited today. We are going to be having a conversation with Earl Brigham. If you are in the Winter Garden area, this is probably a name or at least a fixture that you probably have seen or heard about. There's been lots of articles written on him from newspapers, and I'm just very excited to have this conversation. But also wanted to let you know if you could subscribe, hit the subscribe button here on our YouTube channel. That would be extremely helpful for us. But today, I'm just excited. I'm excited to hear from Earl. I'm excited to get to know you a little bit better. And hopefully by the end of this conversation, the people that are listening will be encouraged and inspired and maybe just learn a little bit more about you. So Earl, can you tell us just a little bit about yourself? Like who are you? Tell us about your family and maybe what you do here in Winter Garden.
My name is Earl Brigham, and this is my sign name. When I was about 10 years old, I took a fall, and I had a scar there on my forehead, and I was at the deaf school, and I spelled my name to a man there, and he said, "No, we're going to call you Earl because you've got that little scar there where you fell." So I've always grown up with that sign name. And I lived in Winter Garden when I was married the first time, my first wife. We had 4 children together. I am married again, and I still work in Winter Garden, but we live in Oakland. We moved to Oakland about 6 years ago and very happy there.
Oakland's changing a lot from when I was a little guy.
Yes, for sure.
There's so many houses and developments going in there.
Yep. Winter Garden has changed quite a bit as well. I remember when the train used to come through.
That's right.
And I loved to see the train, and now the trail is so popular, and I'm on the trail every day, and it's good to see all the changes.
So how long have you been working in Winter Garden?
45 years.
45 years.
Started in '76.
So you remember before any of the restaurants were downtown?
Right? No restaurants.
I remember riding my bike downtown, and pretty much the only thing to do was go to Cumberland Farms and get a drink.
Yes, true. My old barber shop, there was some kind of a store that you could, yes, a convenience store, yes. You could buy a sandwich and a drink there.
And then there was a pharmacy, McClung's. I don't know if you remember McClung's. And you could get vanilla, you could get like real vanilla soda in there, and I thought that was the coolest thing.
Yes, I remember that well.
And the only thing there probably was other things, but there was a Hallmark store downtown as well.
Yes, I remember when that closed. I can remember I bought a small Bible there, and I still have it.
Oh. So let's go back to high school. Going way back. You attended in St. Augustine. Is that correct?
Yes. I didn't start school till I was 10 years old, 1955. I was very, very behind when they finally put me in school. I graduated in 66. I was very involved in football, loved to play, played basketball, ran track. I didn't enjoy really the dorm. The food was terrible. But I did enjoy school, and of course I enjoyed sports. I would enjoy coming home in the summer to eat my mother's cooking. It was the best, and I dreaded going back because the food was so terrible. Sometimes I would actually, when they first dropped me off that first time, I cried for 2 weeks when they left me there. I just had never been separated from my family. And even as I got older, it was hard to go back and be separated from my family. You didn't come home very often. I didn't see my siblings very much. Didn't really grow up together.
And that school was unique, correct? It wasn't, it was, well, obviously it was a boarding school, but it was just for deaf and blind students?
Yes, the deaf and blind were separated. They were not in the same dorms. Also at that time, black and white were separated. You were not in dorms together, mixed.
Wow. And if I'm remembering correctly, hopefully I am, but Ray Charles actually went to that same school. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
So the two most famous graduates are Earl Brigham and Ray Charles.
Exactly. We actually, just a little added note, we were separated according to race, but at graduation time, we would be together. They would put us together for graduation.
Other than the really bad food and missing your family, is there any other experiences during that time that really stood out?
Loved to go to the beach. We would run on the beach. Probably about 5 miles. They would take the team down there, and we would run. And we had to hurry and get back on time. Very strict rules there for the dorms. But I enjoyed the beach, enjoyed going to downtown St. Augustine, going to the forts that were there. And I had no transportation, of course. We would just run there. We'd go to see the movies sometimes and make sure to be on time. But I enjoyed it.
Now let's go back even further than grade school. I've heard that you have an interesting journey to the States.
I was born in Panama, the Canal Zone. When I was 5, we came back to the States. I remember being on the boat and that we first stopped in Cuba, and I remember we had to have a practice time with life vest and with inflating them and making sure everything worked. I remember being a little boy and watching as they did that with all the passengers. And we practiced that. And then we ended up in New York, saw the Statue of Liberty, and I remember that we moved to Maryland. I remember that they took me to Johns Hopkins to try to find out why I was deaf, and couldn't really find any answers. After that, we moved to Georgia. Somebody in Georgia told my parents that there was a good deaf school in Florida and that we needed to move so that I could go to St. Augustine. So we did.
Well, that's quite a journey. So we've been going back and forth. So now let's fast forward into your adult years. And let's talk about your occupation. You actually have kind of a dual role. So what is your occupation?
been a barber all these years. I started in Pine Hills. I was there for 10 years. Moved to Winter Garden. I remember I saw an advertisement in the paper and said they were hiring a barber. So I thought, okay, well, give it a shot, see what happens. And when they found out I was deaf, they said no. And I said, no, I worked in Pine Hills for 10 years. I can do this. Do you know who Ed Reeves is? And he would recommend me. And they didn't want to take a chance on me. And they said, okay. Finally, they gave in. They said, we'll give you 90 days. And kept on working. Still there.
Your 90 days is gone a long time ago.
Right.
So, Earl, about 37 years ago that was a long time ago, but that was in Winter Garden, and that it's a day that you probably don't remember, but it's etched in my memory. And these are actually pictures of my very first haircut as a little guy. So you and I both look a lot different.
Your mother?
Yes, Joyce.
You were crying.
My nieces asked if I had just got a shot. I said, no, I was getting a haircut. I don't know why this was such a traumatic experience for me, but I was having a bad day, apparently. So my very first haircut was an interesting experience. And they've got a little bit better, but yeah, this was not my best day, and I don't know why this was such a terrifying day for me. But obviously, I don't still go to you to get my hair cut for obvious reasons. All of my hair just moved down to my chin. I know. So you don't have a big clientele for bald people, do you? Not a big.
Actually, some come to me to shave. Some come to get their beard trimmed.
Yeah. Maybe you'll see me again. But in addition to being a barber, you also have a different role here in town as well. Is that correct?
I'm a pastor for the deaf, and I love being involved in the ministry. To be honest with you, for many years, I didn't enjoy being a barber. I had not become a Christian yet, and I was miserable. I did it. I went to work every day, but I wasn't happy. In 1971, I received Christ as my Savior. 2 years later, God convicted me to be content with what He'd provided for me and the skill that He'd given me, and the people that I was able to share the gospel with as they would come in to get their hair cut. And I just became enthusiastic over my job as a barber. And I'm thankful all these years to have been in Winter Garden. And I am satisfied with my job, and I enjoy my job. And God opened the possibility for me to be involved in ministry, and I didn't expect that. And when I'm not busy, I study my Bible and I make notes for the next time I'm going to teach. You remember at my old shop, I used to have a table, and I would spread my Bible out there and study there. And sometimes deaf would come to the shop and talk to me, and several have been saved by coming into the barbershop just to chat. And I would lock the door and not let anybody in, and we'd have a chat, and they'd get saved and then go on their way. So I'm thankful for those two jobs.
So it became much more than just cutting hair. There was purpose, a lot more purpose behind it.
Yes, for sure.
That's great. Well, one of the things I wanted to talk about before we kind of move into a different area, do you have any proudest accomplishments in either as pastorate or as a barber or both? What are some of your proudest achievements in those areas?
Honestly, I'm proud that God has given me such an opportunity and that I didn't expect. God gave me a reason, a purpose in life, Honestly, growing up, my goal in life was to be a Catholic priest. Our family was Catholics, and I thought, okay, I'm going to be the first deaf priest. But God led me, and I was saved, and I'm very thankful for both opportunities in my life. I remember when I was going through that discouraging time of not being happy with my job, my stepdad sat down with me and said, but you have a skill that God's given you to use your hands to cut hair. You need to use that skill. And he also gave me the skill to preach and minister to the deaf. And I've never been to college for that, but it's only through the Lord I've been able to do that.
And both as pastoring and as barber, your hands are like your most valuable tool, aren't they?
Exactly. Using my hands all the time.
So Earl, one of the biggest reasons why I wanted you to be able to come in today is because you've had to overcome a lot of obstacles to get to where you are, and I know that you're still pushing forward, and none of us have arrived, but you certainly have had this ability to overcome a lot in your life, even in your professional life, to be able to succeed and have a thriving business downtown. And a lot of our families face a great deal of adversity. And they also have big dreams for their life. And a lot of times it's difficult to see how those two things exist. How do I go after my dreams, but there's this huge obstacle? And you, I thought, would be the perfect person to really be able to speak into this. So somebody that might be watching this video that has these huge dreams, but their obstacles seem bigger, what would you say to encourage that person watching today?
I know that it's very hard to have a disability. It's not easy. But I would encourage them, first of all, to know Jesus Christ. There is no strength, there is no success without Him helping us in our lives. And so I would encourage that. So many times with disabilities, we forget about God. And we forget that He wants to be involved in our lives. Many times the deaf say, I can't do that, I can't do that. There's discrimination at the job. I can't. And I was the same before I knew Christ. I thought others were against me because of my deafness. But God had a plan, and He changed me. And I realized that I can do it. I can do it with depending on the Lord. To not focus on the negatives, to keep in my mind that the Lord will help me to take one step at a time and go forward.
It's a perspective shift.
Yes.
And being able to, I love just hearing you talk about not focusing, your focus shifted from the obstacle to Jesus.
Right.
It's easier said than done. And so I know you as well would just love to encourage, and I would love to encourage our families. We know it's difficult. We say these things, but we also know that it's hard, and life is still going to be hard. Jesus doesn't always remove those obstacles, but He walks with us in those obstacles, and I love that about Him, and I love for that to be our message of encouragement to our families.
Yes, for sure. I would encourage them to focus on what they can do and what God has enabled them to do. Not think about, as so many times disabled people do, who will pay for my next this or that? Who will give me money today? Who will? No, but to realize I can do this. I don't need to depend on the government. I don't need to depend on others to give me handouts. I can trust God, and He will give me the skill I need and the opportunities and the ability. It's hard for the deaf. It's hard for all disabled. I'm not saying it's not hard. I know that. But when you see that others can be successful and that your focus needs to be on the Lord, we don't see others' problems. We got to forget ourselves and go forward.
Well, a conversation that we just had here in our office was for many that are in the middle of an obstacle. It's so difficult to see anything positive when you're in the middle of it. So we thought it would be encouraging to whoever might be in the middle of an obstacle right now to see somebody that's on the other side of that. And sometimes it takes seeing God's provision in other people's lives to give us hope that He can also provide for us. So I know your story is going to provide that source of hope for a lot of people. Not to put their hope in you, because this whole conversation has been you placing your hope in Jesus Christ. So I appreciate you doing that, Earl.
Amen.
Well, Earl, I want to thank you so much for sitting and having this conversation with me and allowing us to use this really as a resource for the people in our community. But before we go, is there anything else that you would like to share with our community?
Yes. I would like to share about when I was in St. Augustine. I didn't start there till I was 10 years old. I was very behind in my education. I couldn't read. I couldn't write at 10 years old. I didn't know my name. I didn't know how old I was. And I went to St. Augustine. And my parents had explained to the school how behind I was. I went to school there and I began to learn. I had never seen sign language before, ever. And so I began to learn very quickly as I was there. I found out what my name was, how old I was. I began to learn to read. As I got older, there was a friend there who was older than me, and we went to school together. He was deaf as well. And he began to talk to me about the Bible, and I said, do not tell me about the Bible. I'm Catholic. I know you're Baptist. I don't want to hear about Baptist. I'm Catholic, and that's the way I'm going to stay. Leave me alone. And he did. I graduated in 1966. He had been gone for a few years. And then some time passed. I lived with my parents, and I noticed they were drinkers and smokers, and I noticed that they stopped. I had never done either of those things. And so I saw, okay, where's the beer? Where's the cigarette butts on the porch outside? So my parents didn't sign, of course. I asked, what's wrong? Why? And my father said, come here, I want to show you. He had a Bible. And I said, don't show me the Bible. I remembered Joe had done the same thing at St. Augustine. I don't want to see the Bible. Don't show it to me. And I told my mother, why is he saying all this to me? He knows I've never smoked. I've never drank like you do. You always did. And I know I'm going to heaven. I'm 100% sure. And they said, wait. My father showed me Romans 3:23. I said to my mother, you mean that I have sin? And she said, yes, you were born in sin. I said, I've never done all these terrible things you've done. Don't tell me that. Do you mean if I die, I'm going to go to hell? I'm going to go to heaven. I'm a good boy. No, that's not what it takes. You need to ask Jesus to forgive your sin. So I said, how am I going to do that? My father wrote out a paper, folded it up, put it in my pocket. That was on a Friday. I said, I'll go to Mass on Sunday, and I'll pray what's written here. And my dad said, what if you die before Sunday? You don't know what's going to happen. And I said, you mean I can do this anywhere? I don't have to go to church? I can go in my bedroom? And they said, yes. So I went in my bedroom, closed the door, thought about it, read the paper, got down on my knees by my bed, and asked Jesus to forgive my sin and save me. And I began to cry. I opened the door and ran out of the bedroom. My mother knew. I said, "Where's my brother? Where's my brother? I have to tell him." I went to all the neighbors one by one. "Where's Bobby? Where's Bobby? Bobby, come on. You got to come home right now." And I explained. I didn't know how to share the gospel, but I told my brother what had happened to me. Same with my sisters. We got baptized at the same time, and I've loved soul winning ever since. I do the same thing at the barbershop. I share the gospel. I hand out tracts. I've gone on mission trips. I have loved what I've done for the Lord in sharing the gospel, and I'm very grateful.
And that all started with a seed that Joe planted in St. Augustine years and years and years ago.
Yes, for sure.
Well, I want to encourage you that you have been that seed person in so many others' lives. In the years of you working in Winter Garden, you have planted so many seeds. And Joe probably has no idea the ripple effect that had in your life and in so many others' lives. And I'm thankful that every now and then God kind of reveals that to us. Like, what we're doing matters. Sharing the gospel matters. And Earl, I just wanted to thank you, one, for speaking to our community today through this video. My prayer is that the video would go well beyond even our lifted disability community, and that other people would stumble across this and be encouraged, but also possibly hear the gospel for the very first time. But I also wanted to thank you as a guy that's was born here in Winter Garden. I want to thank you just for the light that you have been to our city here in Winter Garden. We have seen so many changes throughout the years, but the one thing that's been really consistent is Earl's Barbershop. And you have been so consistent and such a light to our community. And I'm so thankful for you. I'm thankful for the seeds that you've planted, the people's lives that you've impacted. And I pray that God would continue to use you. I know you're not planning on retiring, so I know that God will continue to use you. And I pray that God would expand your territory, and that the platform that you have, that you would continue to use it for God's glory. So thank you so much for being a part of this conversation, but on a much bigger scale. Thank you for being a part of God's story right here in Winter Garden, and the impact that you've had on our community. So thank you, Earl.
Thank you.